I would say the best thing to do is to think about how you might design for what we're calling lifestyle dipping, which is, it speaks to this behavior of flexing to different behaviors and flexing into these different identities and interests and needs. So that, I think, is probably going to be the most effective way of future proofing for 2028, when you've got these consumers that are, maybe interested in, a few particular brands, but they might be feeding a little bit more into one particular persona depending on what's going on in their lives at that time.
This is Ella Hudson, Head of Macro and Consumer Forecasting at WGSN. And today we're discussing how you and I will behave in the future in our annual Future Consumer Forecast. We'll look into what will impact how we live our lives, our communities and lifestyles across all age groups and parts of the world. My guest is WGSN's Ella Hudson, who co-wrote the recently published Future Consumer 2028 forecast. She'll share her insights into the future, how we're going to get there, and much, much more. I'm Carla Buzasi, CEO of WGSN, the world's leading trend forecasting company. You're listening to Lives of Tomorrow, the WGSN podcast about how we'll live our lives in the future. So Ella, let's get into it. I'm very excited about this conversation. Can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Thanks, Carla. I'm Ella Hudson, Head of Consumer and Macro Forecasting at WGSN, and I've just wrapped up working on our suite of macro forecasts, which started with the Vision 2035, which sets out the scenarios set to shape the world 10 years from now, and ended with the Future Consumer 2028 forecast, which I'm really delighted to be here discussing with you today.
Fantastic. Okay, so let's dive straight in.
Yeah.
So our annual Future Consumer Forecast, we drop this every single year. I would say it's arguably our most anticipated forecast. We always break the consumer groups into 4 key personas. So can you unveil our personas for 2028?
I absolutely can. So we're going to start with the Ascendants, and these are those people who, you probably know some of them. In fact, our hope with these personas is that all of them, you're like, oh yeah, I know that person. So yeah, the Ascendants are those ones who see everything as an opportunity for improvement and personal growth. They love being the early adopters. They want to be the first to try, test, and crucially tell their friends, family, quite possibly anyone that will listen, all about this new thing that they're doing. They are very excited about the potential that AI presents to them and the world. And they are definitely going to be the ones who are really open to adopting some of the more divisive neurotechnology coming to market. So in near terms, that could be things like wearables. There's this new wearable by a company called Atlas, which is it sits behind the ear, and it basically tracks brain signals to inform users about how things like their physical activity or phone usage affects their behavior and their focus. So they're going to be willing to try things like that. And then further down the line, bridging now more into 2035 territory, they're going to be willing to experiment with things like BCIs or brain-computer interfaces, which do sound a bit scary to me, but are being tipped to potentially be able to bridge the divide between artificial intelligence and human intelligence. So the Ascendants are going all in with that tech. It is important to say, though, that for them, like, optimization is not like purely functional. It's not kind of this cold, like, just wanting to optimize. There is a really emotional element that is also quite playful, quite joyful. We've talked a lot about play at WGSN, and there really is that edge to the way the Ascendants embrace optimization. Then we have the Keepers. These consumers are looking to really align themselves with brands that they can trust. And for that, they demand radical transparency. Again, trust is a huge topic that we've been forecasting for many years now, but it is increasingly becoming a consumer priority. And the Keepers want to safeguard the things that matter to them most. So that could be family, friends, freedom, privacy. They are going to really need to know that that their personal data is being protected when they engage with a brand. And that is absolutely a number one priority for the keepers. Although I will say that this point around data privacy and data protection is increasingly becoming a consumer demand across the board. There are many signals pointing to this. One that comes to mind comes from a PwC survey that found that 83% of consumers cite data protection as important for earning their trust. And there's going to be this real tension, I think, with this, because as technology advances and personalization becomes more and more possible, consumers and brands are going to kind of be doing this dance between like how much data, like from a consumer point of view, like how much data are you willing to give up in order to benefit from personalization, and then kind of how a brand's going to entice or encourage or confirm for consumers that they are going to be, respecting their data in a really effective way in order for them to provide the personalization that is possible. The last point on this group is that they tend to lean more towards midlife, which means that they are quite likely to be caregivers of some description, so be that children or parents or grandparents, or maybe even all of the above. So they're going to need products that are reliable and really multitasking. Next, we have the restorers, and these people are on a mission to slow down. They are in search of quietude, which is an emotion that we spotlight in our 2028 emotions forecast, which is a partner forecast to our personas forecast. And this emotion really describes the way that people are logging off, buying less, and stepping away from the pressures of performance and perfectionism in order to find a sense of peace. One really interesting trend that I came across when I was researching this group is that people are essentially unbranding the products that they have at home in order to quieten down the visual clutter that surrounds them. So people are actually peeling the labels off of the products that are on their shelves just so they don't have to look at them, and so that they can just, find this state of quietude, which we're seeing sort of bubble up in many different ways. The restorers are those customers who are going to pay more for products and services that support local economies. They are really going to want to invest in those brands that enable them to build those human connections. They are going to be really interested in products that have that kind of mark of the handmade, the handcrafted, and things that are sensorially rich. So things that you can touch, taste, smell, hear. They're not really interested in just kind of flat 2D experiences, although it's important to say that they're not anti-tech. That was really important when we were kind of writing this forecast. We didn't want any of the personas to come through as being anti-tech, because I don't think that, even when people are trying to find balance, that's the point. It's about having those boundaries and using tech really intentionally. So they're not anti-tech, but the tech they do use needs to feel very human, and even, maybe be so seamlessly integrated into their surroundings that it's almost invisible. So that's quite exciting to imagine what that might look like. And then the last group are the challengers. I love this group. They were actually the easiest ones to write. They almost arrived on the page before we'd finished doing our due diligence. I think it's like they just have this visceral energy. They are here, like ready for action, ready for change. And this is how they came to be. Although, of course, we did do all of our due diligence and checks and balances before just letting them charge on through into 2028. But the thing about them is they're pushing for change, and they are really concerned with trust and transparency. They are more concerned with trust and transparency for the greater good, whereas the restorers maybe are a little bit more concerned with their inner circle, their immediate friends, family, community. The challengers are taking a bigger picture, and they're doing it with this kind of cheeky, or what we're calling like a snarky attitude. Snark is another emotion in our 2028 emotions forecast. And it is a little bit mean. I'm not going to lie. It is a little bit mean, but it's weaponized with the best intentions. It's a really interesting emotion, and one that I think we're going to start to see people embody more in order to get a reaction and hold brands and organizations to account. They are going to want to align with the brands that provide them the platform to bring about the change they want to see. And increasingly, we're going to start to see them really holding brands and businesses to account. So yeah, as they come of age, step into power, they're going to start to create change from the inside out. So one signal that points to this comes from Deloitte's global survey that found that 41% of Gen Z and millennials rejected a potential employer based on their personal ethics. So yeah, it's quite a competitive jobs market. However, there are these people who are like really embodying the ethics that they believe in when they are choosing where to work and where to spend their energy. So we are going to start to see this change being amplified in the coming years. So yeah, those are the 4 groups.
Amazing. Now, we always get the question, I've had it many times in my career at WGSN, why 4? Why and how do we manage to distill it to just those 4 cohorts?
Mm-hmm. Time and again, all of our research does come down to landing on these distinctive archetypes who are really driving the bulk of consumer spending. Some of them definitely do skew more towards a particular geography or generation. Really, we are seeing this becoming much more about mindset than about, age or gender or geography or those other identifiers that consumers' personas have typically been organized by.
Okay. So how defined are they then? So you've talked about this fluidity, and how does that, I guess, create the opportunities or potentially some problems for businesses and brands who are utilizing these to plan for the future?
So I think the best way to think about this is that we all have like a level of homeostasis that we are most comfortable with. So that level of homeostasis defines our spending behaviors, our values, our priorities. Like that is true. But depending on the context, we may flex a little bit into some of the other personas. So taking myself, for example, I am a keeper, at least at this point in my life, when I have young children and parents and grandparents who are inevitably aging and need more from me than they have done in the past. However, I can absolutely step into challenger mode if something riles me up enough. Probably something to do with, as I said, those loved ones who I am being a restorer around. And also, a keeper. But I can also, really know and recognize in myself that in the last year, there have been moments when I've really needed to embody a bit more restorer in order to look after myself. So that, I think that probably does sound like a challenge to any brand wanting to gain my loyalty, because I'm kind of, this one persona like bridging into these other 2. But also, I think that presents a huge opportunity because brands could, help me to embody a bit more challenger or a bit more restorer. These behaviors, which I want to feel more of, but which I'm not necessarily so comfortable or so innately ready to embody.
So I guess that leads really nicely on to how do brands use these personas to start planning for 2028 now? Is it all about going, well, this is the persona that we're going after completely and utterly, or is it about nodding to all 4 and thinking about how their marketing messages land, how their product assortment lands? What's the best way to utilize the information?
I would say the best thing to do is to think about how you might design for what we're calling lifestyle dipping, which is, it speaks to this behavior of flexing to different behaviors and flexing into these different identities and interests and needs. So that, I think, is probably going to be the most effective way of future proofing for 2028 when you've got these consumers that are, maybe interested in, a few particular brands, but they might be feeding a little bit more into one particular persona depending on what's going on in their lives at that time. And then the other thing, which I think is important to mention here, is the need for adaptability. So this goes across this is like at an organizational level, it's going to be an essential capability, but also at an individual level. Every single kind of point of my research, from the Vision 2035 through to Future Consumer 2028, time and again, this point around adaptability surfaces. And I think I can confidently say it is the number one capability that we all need to cultivate if we are going to thrive in the age of AI. And it's really difficult because speaking to for myself, but also I just think generally, like, human beings are not super comfortable with change, let alone constant change. But that is the world that we are in. Change is the only constant. It's going to be the only constant between now and 2028, now and 2035. So getting comfortable at being able to adapt is going to be essential.
I've found this year in talking to other business leaders that there is that recognition. And if we think back to things like Liberation Day with the tariffs being imposed, everyone sort of froze. They didn't know what to do. They wanted to wait and see. And then this dawning realization that tactic is not a tactic. That's the absence of strategy. And so you are now seeing businesses like, okay, well then if this world, when things can change from day to day or from hour to hour, we need to be able to work out how we continue through that. And I think that's quite interesting. I've definitely seen a shift change, I would say more in the second half of this year. And to your point, none of that goes away. It's not tariffs necessarily that will drive that in future years, but change is the constant. And we need to be prepared for that, both at a business level, but also as individuals.
That ties into that piece around trust that we talked about and transparency. And I think one kind of really big theme that came through from all of our research was like the need for brands and businesses to be really transparent about, when they make a mistake. And I think that getting comfortable with that and getting comfortable with being like, we don't have all the answers, but this is what we're doing. This is what we're trying. It's going to be so important if you are going to get good at being adaptable, because you're not going to have all the answers. So it's about kind of, taking your customer on a journey with you and just being very transparent about where you're going and where you're trying to get to. And then when maybe things fall by the wayside and you get back on and you keep trying.
So let's talk about actually how this all manifests. So what are the shifts that you're predicting for 2028 with these four future consumers in mind?
And in a nutshell, a nice way to tie that up is to maybe come back to our STEPIC methodology. This is a framework that we use to basically stress test trends against the macro drivers that are shaping the world. So if we start with society, the fragmented identities and the blurring of traditional demographics are absolutely going to be shaping consumer personas and consumer identities in 2028. If we come to tech, the impact is, of course, going to be huge and really, really complex. To be honest, I am a bit sick of talking about the way that technology is going to shape everything, but it's unavoidable that it really is touching every aspect of life right now. The way that AI is advancing, it's going to enable people to sort of design their identities. We talked a bit about this when we were talking about the Ascendants and the way that people are going to be able to hack their identities, experiment much more. And this is going to basically multiply the way that consumers are showing up in the world and the spaces that they're showing up in. So ultimately, I suppose, fragmenting identity even more. Climate disruption and polarization are going to be the driving forces for the environment and politics pillars. For industry, this is really going to be about the need for trust. This is really going to be non-negotiable in 2028. And this is going to depend so much on that piece around transparency and brands really embodying the values that they claim to profess. One example that comes to mind is from the clothing brand Aerie, who recently launched a campaign where they promised to not use any AI models in any of their imagery. But they went beyond saying this is what we're going to do, and they've promised that they're going to hold all of their brand partners to that same standard. So this really meets that consumer demand for businesses to not just kind of make surface level promises, but actually really embody the ethics that they claim to stand for. And then lastly, creativity, which is, I would say, an innately human capability, although we know that AI is getting very, very good at creativity of its own kind. But this very human expression of creativity is going to become much more valued in the coming years and cultivated in new ways or leveraged in new ways. So in recent years, we've talked a lot about creativity being used as a lever to help consumers really connect with a sense of joy. But I think as we move into 2028, consumers and businesses alike are going to be using creativity much more for problem solving. So at a consumer level, they are going to really be thinking very creatively about what they can do to exercise their authority to build the world that they want to live in. Because, like I said, we are in this state of flux right now, which is quite uncomfortable, where things are changing very, very quickly. They could go in many different directions. It's quite hard to know, with any real certainty exactly where things are going to go, which is why in our 2035 forecast, we were forecasting scenarios, not one single future, but a range of futures. So creativity is going to be absolutely essential to all of us at an individual and at a organizational level to build the future that we want to live in.
Amazing. Okay, we are going to talk about you for a little bit, and then we will come back to the topic in hand. So these are quick fire questions. First thing that comes into your head. What did you say you wanted to be when you were at secondary school?
I wanted to be a vet.
Did you? I wanted to be a vet as well.
Did you?
Yes, but it was very short-lived because I went on a French exchange when I was 13, and they had all of these rabbits, and I was out playing with the rabbits. And I remember being quite appalled by how many rabbits they had in these quite small cages. And then we went to school and we came back, and the rabbit I'd been playing with, they very proudly showed me, which was now skinned on the table and was going to be made into rabbit stew that evening. I think that was when I became a vegetarian, and it was definitely when I decided that I was too squeamish to be a vet.
Oh my goodness. I also had a moment of reckoning when we took our pet dog to have a particularly revolting procedure. I'm not going to go into it, but yeah, that was the end of my ambitions of being a vet.
Amazing. Okay. What's your most frequently used app?
Oh,
Honestly.
WhatsApp.
WhatsApp. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, there we are. That's that speaks to you as a communicator and a carer as well.
Yes, that's the one.
Your favourite AI tool?
I'm kind of ashamed to say it, but I am quite enjoying ChatGPT. I don't know. Yeah.
Has it replaced your Googling yet?
Not replaced it fully, no.
Okay.
I'm still on the edges, but it's pretty good at some things. Yeah.
Song currently on repeat?
You're not going to try to get me to sing, are you? It's a drum song from 2010, and it's got this funny little verse in it that's it's really fast, and I can sing it fast, and my kids find it funny. And I like it because 2010 is the year that I met my husband and fell in love with him. So it's that brings back happy memories.
Now, my producer is definitely now pinging me going, make her sing it.
No, absolutely not.
What was the last thing on your bucket list that you ticked off?
This probably doesn't count because I've already done it, but I went to this amazing forest in France in the summer. It was just amazing, and I was just amongst all of these oak trees for a few days, and I had a hammock, and so it's not a bucket list thing because I've already done it, but I would love to go back there.
Okay, all right, we're going to get back to the topic in hand. It doesn't matter how you think about cohorts, nuances, psychographics. Inevitably, people want to know about generational behaviours and the nuances that separate them. I was at a conference yesterday for our other business, IWSR, and I think if I played a drinking game, given it was IWSR, which is data for the Bev Alc business, I would have been absolutely hammered by the end of the day if I drank every time we said the words Gen Z, because there were so many questions about it. It was a really big topic of the day. Are there any key points that you feel through the research you've done for Future Consumer you can share about how those generations are going to change come 2028?
Yeah. I was chatting with our head of retail, Laura Saunter, on this topic, and I was very relieved at the end of that conversation that the upshot of that conversation was the biggest shift isn't just between generations, but between mindsets. So millennials and Gen Z, they might shop in the same places, but they do approach shopping in very different ways. So for millennials, it's really about value and convenience. They grew up with Amazon Prime and loyalty programs, and they really expect things to be fast, easy, and reliable. This, is in alignment with the life stage that they are at. Whereas Gen Z, they are less concerned with value, and you could say they're more concerned with values. So they're going to shop much more based on who they are. They care about sustainability and inclusivity and authenticity. And that's not to say that millennials don't care about those things, but it's, maybe less of a pressing priority for them at this point in time. So looking to the future, millennials are really going to drive the evolution of effortless retail. So that's going to be things like smarter personalization, frictionless payment, predictive convenience, which is when we get into things like agentic commerce, which is really mind-blowing. We have a forecast on that on the site. There's lots and lots that we could say on that, but they really are going to be kind of wanting convenience more and more. Gen Z, on the other hand, they're going to push retail and the shopping experience to become much more expressive and ethical. Their version of shopping is going to be less about consumption and more about participation and connection, and aligning with those brands that really reflect their identities and their values. So I would say the future of shopping isn't really necessarily about picking one generation to design for, but more about building an ecosystem that, meets the needs of the millennials who really want convenience, and then Gen Z who are much more motivated by meaning.
Okay, I like that. Motivated by meaning. That's a nice little catchphrase. Is there anything from your forecast that you think is particularly exciting and that's dramatically going to impact how we consume as we come to this sort of next couple of years?
I'm really excited about how the need, or the need for human connection is going to transform the way that we behave and the places we show up at, and how we prioritize our resources, like not just money, but time, energy. It's going to be interesting to see human-made becoming like a label of premiumization, I think, probably in the way that we're used to seeing handcrafted as an identifier of something which is quality. I think we're going to see that coming through with like human-made products and services. So that's quite exciting. And yeah, I'm excited about the way that people are becoming much more intentional about the way they are using technology. Technology is becoming more pervasive, more advanced, but people are really kind of trying to be much more conscious about how they use tech. We know that people are wanting to spend on experiences, spend on ways of connecting with other people, and that's really exciting, especially after the pandemic and the hangover from all of that, and how we are still trying to get comfortable with coming back out into the world, especially for some younger people for whom, they really missed out on some of those formative years of getting comfortable with human to human interactions. So I'm excited about how, I guess, ultimately technology is going to really force us to look at what it is to be human, and maybe really value some of our innately human capabilities.
Okay, so final question for the day.
Yeah.
Are you more anxious or excited about the future?
I'm anchoring into hope. I think you can't be in this job, you can't be forecasting the future without feeling hopeful. And so I'm going to kind of cop out a little bit and say I'm feeling hopeful.
Big thank you to Ella Hudson, Head of Macro and Consumer Forecasting at WGSN. Please do check out our other podcast, Create Tomorrow, with my amazing colleague, Cassandra Napoli. But that's it for now. I'll return with a new episode of Lives of Tomorrow in 14 days' time.